The soft morning sunlight spread across the busy streets of New York City as a long black limousine stopped in front of the Crystal Grand Hotel, one of the most luxurious hotels in the country. The golden letters of the hotel name gleamed above the entrance as uniformed doormen hurried forward. People passing by turned to look. The car alone was enough to draw attention. The door opened slowly and out stepped a man who carried an air of quiet power. He was tall, with neatly combed black hair and a calm, confident expression. His suit was tailored to perfection, and his watch glimmered faintly under the morning light. He was Mr. Li Wei, a well-known Chinese businessman and one of the youngest millionaires in Shanghai. His name was whispered in business circles around the world, the man who had built his empire from nothing. Through determination and vision, the hotel staff, already informed that a VIP guest was arriving, quickly lined up at the entrance. The manager, Mr. Robinson, adjusted his tie nervously. "Everyone smile and stay alert," he whispered to the front desk staff. "This man is a very important guest." As Mr. Li entered the grand lobby, the scent of fresh lilies filled the air. The floor was marble, polished so perfectly that it reflected the golden chandeliers above. Guests looked up from their seats in curiosity. There was something elegant but mysterious about the man walking toward the reception, calm, silent, and observant. Mr. Li walked with a sense of purpose, pulling a small black suitcase behind him. He was on a business trip to meet potential investors, and this hotel had been chosen for its reputation for world-class service. But what he didn't know was that this visit would soon turn into something far more memorable than a business deal. The receptionist, a young woman named Emily, smiled brightly as he approached the counter. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Crystal Grand Hotel," she said politely. Mr. Li nodded and responded in Mandarin. 早上好，请问我的房间准备好了吗? "Good morning. Is my room ready?" Emily froze. She blinked twice, trying to make sense of what he had said. The words sounded soft, rhythmic, but she didn't understand a single one. "I'm sorry, sir," she said with an awkward smile. "Could you repeat that? In English?" Mr. Li smiled politely but repeated the same words again in Mandarin, slower this time. Emily's nervous smile faded a little. She looked at her computer screen, pretending to check something, hoping the manager would notice and come help her. A few seconds later, Mr. Robinson appeared beside her. "Good morning, sir," he said confidently. "Welcome to Crystal Grand Hotel. How may I assist you?" Mr. Li looked relieved and started speaking again in Mandarin, explaining that he had a reservation for 3 nights in the presidential suite and wanted to confirm a private meeting room. But the moment he finished, Mr. Robinson's smile stiffened. He had no idea what the man had just said. He laughed awkwardly, nodding. Yes, okay," he said, though he didn't understand a word. Mr. Li frowned slightly, sensing the confusion. He tried using hand gestures, pointing at the screen, then showing his phone with the reservation email. But the staff only grew more flustered. Emily whispered, "Sir, do we have anyone who speaks Chinese?" The manager shook his head. "No one, I'm afraid. Maybe the concierge?" They called the concierge, who arrived with the same helpless look. He tried using an online translation app, but the result made no sense. The crowd around the reception began to grow. Guests waiting to check in started murmuring. The atmosphere became uncomfortable. Mr. Li sighed, glancing at his watch. He wasn't angry, but clearly frustrated. He was used to efficiency and respect. Back in China, people moved quickly around him, but here he felt invisible. He spoke again, his tone calm but slightly firmer. 我只是想知道房间是不是准备好了. I just want to know if my room is ready. The manager looked lost. Room? He guessed. Yes, room. Room ready. He pointed upstairs, hoping that would solve the problem, but the tone of his voice, a bit too loud and broken, sounded childish, and a few guests nearby chuckled quietly. Mr. Li's face hardened. He wasn't trying to be difficult. He just wanted to communicate. But somehow his language, the one that expressed his thoughts and emotions so perfectly, had become a barrier instead of a bridge. A minute passed. Then 2. The tension in the air thickened. The manager wiped sweat from his forehead. The receptionist fidgeted, and Mr. Li simply stood there silent, dignified, but clearly disappointed. No one noticed that at the far corner of the lobby, a man in a plain blue uniform had stopped mopping the floor. His name was Samuel. He was quiet, hardworking, and often invisible to guests. He had seen the entire situation unfold. The confusion, the awkward smiles, the uncomfortable silence. Samuel's heart beat faster. He recognized the words Mr. Lee had been saying. He had studied Mandarin for years when he was younger. He had even dreamed of becoming a translator once before life took a different turn, but now he was just the man who cleaned the floors of a hotel. Still, he couldn't bear to watch the scene any longer. He wanted to help. He looked at his mop, then at Mr. Lee, and something inside him whispered, "Go on. Do it." He took a deep breath and slowly began to walk toward the front desk, unaware that this one small step would soon change his life forever. The hotel lobby was silent except for the sound of Samuel's footsteps on the marble floor. Everyone turned to look. The millionaire, the manager, the receptionist. They all wondered why the janitor was approaching. But none of them could have imagined that the next few seconds would leave them completely speechless. And so began the story that would remind everyone in that hotel, and soon, the entire world, when that knowledge, respect, and humanity have no uniform. The golden light from the lobby's chandelier danced across the floor as the situation grew more tense. What should have been a smooth check-in had turned into an awkward, frustrating scene. The Chinese millionaire, Mr. Li Wei, stood calmly at the front desk, but his calmness carried a quiet disappointment. He spoke again, his words fluent, his tone respectful, but the sound of Mandarin was like music no one else understood. The staff tried their best, but each attempt only made things worse. The receptionist, Emily, nervously clicked through the booking system while glancing helplessly at her manager. "He's definitely got a reservation," she whispered, "but I can't figure out what he's saying." The manager, Mr. Robinson, smiled stiffly, pretending to understand. "Yes, sir. Welcome, welcome," he said loudly, as if volume would magically turn English into Chinese. He pointed to a form and gestured with exaggerated movements, hoping Mr. Lee would fill it out. Mr. Lee looked at him, his eyebrows tightening slightly. He wasn't angry and just surprised. He had stayed in hundreds of hotels around the world, and in every one of them, someone could speak his language. But here, in one of New York's most famous hotels, not a single person understood him. He spoke again, this time more slowly. "我只是想知道我的房间准备好了没有." I just want to know if my room is ready. But his voice was met with blank stares. The guests around the lobby began whispering. Some found the scene amusing, others uncomfortable. "Why don't they have a translator?" someone murmured. "He looks upset," another whispered. One man chuckled softly. "He's a millionaire. Shouldn't he know English?" Those quiet comments stung more than anyone realized. Mr. Lee heard the laughter and the whispers even if he didn't understand the words. He could feel them. He stood a little straighter, his pride wounded but his dignity intact. The manager pulled out his phone and opened a translation app. He pointed the microphone toward Mr. Lee and said, "Please, speak here." Mr. Lee, slightly confused, repeated his sentence. The app loaded for a few seconds before displaying a broken translation. "I wait room to be ready fast before meal, please." The manager squinted at the screen. "Ah, you want food?" "Restaurant?" Mr. Lee sighed, rubbing his forehead. He wasn't talking about food. He just wanted to check in, nothing more. He looked around the room, searching for understanding, but found none. Minutes passed. The awkwardness grew heavier. The receptionist avoided his eyes. The manager fumbled with his phone, and a few guests quietly filmed the scene. In the corner, near the marble pillar, Samuel, the black servant, watched silently. He had stopped mopping long ago, pretending to tidy a corner while his eyes stayed fixed on the situation. Every word Mr. Lee spoke echoed in his mind. He understood it perfectly. The soft tones of Mandarin, the polite phrasing, it all came back to him like an old memory. Samuel's heart pounded. Part of him wanted to stay quiet, to keep doing his job, blending into the background like he always did. But another part of him whispered, "You can help. You must," he hesitated. What if the manager got angry? What if they thought he was overstepping? But then he looked at Mr. Lee's face. The confusion, the patience wearing thin, the simple desire to be understood, and he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. Meanwhile, the tension at the front desk reached its peak. The manager raised his voice slightly, trying to sound confident. Sir, we fix this soon. Please wait, okay? Mr. Li frowned, his voice calm but cold as he replied in Mandarin. 没有人能理解我，这真是荒谬. No one understands me. This is ridiculous. Emily glanced at the manager nervously. He doesn't look happy, she whispered. At that exact moment, a quiet, steady voice broke through the noise. 他只是想知道房间是不是准备好了. Everyone froze. The words came from the far corner of the lobby. Clear, fluent Mandarin, spoken with perfect pronunciation. Heads turned instantly. Mr. Li looked up, his eyes widening slightly. The staff turned to see Samuel, the hotel's janitor, standing with his mop in one hand and a calm expression on his face. The manager blinked in disbelief. Did you just speak Chinese? Samuel nodded respectfully, his tone humble but confident. Yes, sir. I studied Mandarin for 5 years. He turned to Mr. Li and continued in fluent Chinese. 先生，他们想帮您，但是没人懂中文。我可以帮您沟通。Sir, they want to help you, but no one here understands Chinese. I can help you communicate. Mr. Li's face softened immediately. For the first time since arriving, he smiled. Relief washed over his features as he replied, 谢谢你，终于有人懂我说的话了。Thank you. Finally, someone understands what I'm saying. Samuel smiled back. 不客气，先生，我很高兴能帮到您。You're welcome, sir. I'm happy to help. The manager stood speechless. The receptionist's mouth fell open. Guests nearby stopped whispering and started filming again, but this time not out of mockery. Out of amazement. In just a few sentences, the atmosphere of the entire room changed. The tension melted away, replaced by awe. The man everyone had overlooked, the cleaner, the background figure, had just done what no one else could. Samuel translated effortlessly, his tone professional and kind. Within moments, Mr. Li's check-in was completed smoothly. The millionaire thanked him again and again, his gratitude genuine. As Mr. Li took his room key and walked toward the elevator, he paused beside Samuel and said softly in Chinese, You are a remarkable man. Samuel bowed his head slightly. I just did what was right, sir. The elevator doors closed and silence filled the lobby once more, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This time it was full of wonder. The manager turned to Samuel, still stunned. Why didn't you tell us you could speak Chinese? Samuel smiled faintly. No one ever asked, and in that simple sentence, every person in that lobby learned a lesson they would never forget. That respect should never depend on position, and brilliance can be found in the most unexpected people. The hotel lobby had gone completely silent. The sound of Samuel's calm, fluent Mandarin still hung in the air like music. For a moment, no one moved. Not the guests, not the staff, not even Mr. Li. It was as if time had stopped. Everyone's eyes turned toward Samuel, the man they had seen 100 times but never truly noticed. The man who mopped the floors quietly, stayed in the background and never raised his voice. But now he stood in the center of the room, confident, composed, and speaking a language no one expected him to know. Mr. Li looked at him with surprise that slowly turned into admiration. 你真的会说中文? He asked with a small, curious smile. You really speak Chinese? Samuel nodded, bowing his head slightly. 是的，先生。我学了好几年. Yes, sir. I studied it for several years. The guests who had been whispering earlier now stared in disbelief. Some even stood up from their seats to get a better view. The receptionist, Emily, whispered under her breath. I can't believe this. The cleaner speaks Chinese better than any of us speak English. Mr. Robinson, the hotel manager, still couldn't find his voice. He had been working in hospitality for 20 years, trained to handle royalty, diplomats, and billionaires, but never had a moment like this made him feel so small. Samuel's words had changed everything. The tension that had filled the air minutes ago now turned into curiosity and respect. The confusion was gone. Samuel gently stepped closer to the front desk, turning to Mr. Li. 先生, 您想确认房间和会议室, 对吗? He asked clearly. Sir, you want to confirm your room and meeting room, correct? Mr. Li nodded quickly, relieved. 对的，对的。谢谢你。Hi. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Samuel turned to the manager, translating fluently. Sir, he's asking if his suite and private meeting room are ready. Mr. Robinson blinked. Oh, yes, of course. Everything's ready, he stammered. Tell him it's all arranged. Samuel smiled faintly and translated smoothly. Mr. Lee smiled in return, his eyes warm with gratitude. He took out a business card and handed it to Samuel. "你帮了我很大的忙," he said. "You've been a great help to me." Samuel accepted it with both hands, the traditional gesture of respect in Chinese culture, which made Mr. Lee smile even wider. "Your manners are very proper," he said softly, almost to himself. Watching from behind the counter, Emily whispered to her colleague, "Did he just bow? He even knows their customs." The colleague nodded slowly. "Unbelievable. I've worked here for 5 years and barely know how to say hello in another language." As Samuel continued translating, the entire mood of the lobby shifted. Guests who had been impatient or annoyed now smiled quietly, some even clapping softly after Mr. Lee thanked him. What had started as an awkward misunderstanding was now a beautiful moment of connection. The manager, finally finding his words, stepped forward. "Samuel," he said carefully, still sounding surprised, You never told us you could speak Chinese." Samuel glanced at him politely. "No one ever asked, sir. I didn't think it mattered." That simple answer hit Mr. Robinson harder than he expected. He looked at Samuel, really looked at him, and realized he had never seen him as more than the man who cleaned the floors. He felt a flush of shame rise in his face. Mr. Lee noticed the tension and chuckled gently. "He's very talented," he said in Chinese, nodding toward Samuel. "People like him are rare." Samuel translated the words for the manager, who smiled awkwardly. "Yes, very rare indeed." Before leaving for his suite, Mr. Lee turned to Samuel again and said, "If you ever visit China, please contact me." Samuel smiled, a little shy but deeply moved. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." The millionaire nodded, shook his hand warmly, and walked toward the elevator. But as he left, everyone's eyes followed him. Not because of his wealth, but because of what had just happened. When the elevator doors closed, the lobby seemed to exhale all at once. The noise slowly returned, the distant chatter, the clinking cups from the cafe, the hum of normal hotel life. But something had changed. The guests who had been watching approached Samuel, asking questions, smiling at him. Some congratulated him. Emily clapped him gently on the shoulder. "Samuel, that was incredible," she said sincerely. "You just saved the day," he smiled humbly. "I only did what anyone else would have done." But everyone in that room knew the truth. No one else would have done what he did. Mr. Robinson stood quietly for a moment, then walked over to Samuel. His tone was softer now. "You handled that beautifully. I didn't know you had such skill." Samuel simply nodded. "Thank you, sir." As the day went on, whispers of what happened spread through the entire hotel. Staff members from other floors came down to ask, "Is it true? Did Samuel really speak Chinese to the millionaire?" By evening, everyone knew. Some people were proud, others embarrassed that they'd ever looked down on him. But one thing was certain: Samuel was no longer invisible. That night, when he finished his shift, he stood for a moment in the empty lobby. The marble floor gleamed beneath the chandelier. He saw his reflection faintly and smiled. For years, he had walked through that same space quietly, never seen, never acknowledged. But today, for the first time, people had seen him for who he really was, not just a servant, but a man with knowledge, dignity, and value. As he turned off the lights and walked out, he whispered to himself, "Maybe being silent all this time wasn't a waste. Maybe I was just waiting for the right moment to be heard." And somewhere high above, in the hotel's presidential suite, Mr. Lee sat by his window sipping tea, thinking about the man who had spoken to him like an equal. He smiled softly and murmured in Chinese, "Ren bu ke mao xiang." A person's worth is not judged by their appearance. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the Crystal Grand Hotel, filling the lobby with a soft golden glow. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh flowers. Guests moved about as usual, suitcases rolling, voices murmuring, laughter echoing faintly from the breakfast area. But beneath the normal rhythm of hotel life, something had changed. Everyone in the building knew what had happened the day before. The story of the janitor who spoke perfect Chinese had spread from the reception desk to the top floor. Some still couldn't believe it. Others were quietly proud that it had happened here, in their hotel. When Samuel arrived for his morning shift, heads turned. The other workers smiled at him differently now, not with pity but with genuine respect. Even the usually strict Mr. Robinson greeted him politely. "Morning, Samuel," the manager said, straightening his tie. "The hotel owner himself called last night. He was impressed." Samuel smiled modestly. "Thank you, sir." "Also," Mr. Robinson continued, "the Chinese guest, Mr. Li Wei, asked to see you again. He's having breakfast in the garden lounge." Samuel's heart skipped. "He asked for me?" "Yes," the manager nodded. "Said you were the first person here who really understood him." "Go on, he's waiting." Samuel nodded respectfully and walked toward the glass doors that led to the garden lounge. His footsteps echoed lightly against the marble floor, his heart beating a little faster with each step. Outside, the garden was peaceful. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves. Mr. Li sat at a corner table dressed in a simple gray suit, sipping tea as the morning sun painted his face in soft light. He looked up as Samuel approached him and smiled warmly. "Zhao Shanghao," Mr. Li greeted in Mandarin. "Good morning." Samuel bowed his head slightly and replied with the same grace, "Zhao Shanghao, Shensheng." "Good morning, sir." Mr. Li gestured for him to sit. "Please, join me," he said in slow English this time, his accent thick but clear. Samuel hesitated. "Sir, Mr. Li smiled gently. "No, sir. Today we are just two men having tea." The words carried a kindness that melted away Samuel's nervousness. He sat down quietly across from him. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The world around them felt calm, birds chirping, soft jazz playing in the background, sunlight dancing across the white tablecloth. Finally, Mr. Li leaned back slightly and asked, "Tell me, Samuel, how did you learn Mandarin so well?" Samuel smiled faintly. "A long time ago, I wanted to be a translator. I studied Chinese at university. I even spent 6 months in Beijing as part of a cultural program." Mr. Li's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Really? Your pronunciation is excellent. You must have practiced a lot." Samuel nodded. "I did. I loved the language. It's full of respect, discipline, and meaning. But—" He paused, his smile fading a little. "Life changed. My father got sick, I needed to work, and, well, I ended up here." Mr. Li looked at him quietly for a moment. "And you never stopped learning?" Samuel shook his head. "No, sir. Sometimes I read old Chinese books in my free time. I guess I didn't want to forget who I wanted to become." The sincerity in his voice touched Mr. Li deeply. He saw not a servant, but a man with dreams. Dreams that life had forced to sleep. He nodded slowly and said, "You know, Samuel, I've met many wealthy men, but very few wise ones. You are both humble and educated. That combination is rare." Samuel looked down, embarrassed. "You're too kind, sir." Mr. Li smiled gently. "Kindness is not a gift, Samuel. It's recognition. Yesterday, you gave me something money couldn't buy. Understanding." Samuel looked up, eyes soft with emotion. "I only did what anyone would do." Mr. Li chuckled lightly. "No, anyone could have, but only you did." They both laughed quietly. The tension between wealth and poverty, master and servant, melted away. For a moment, they were simply two people who had found connection in a world that often built walls instead of bridges. As they talked, Mr. Li shared stories of his life in China, how he had grown up in a small village, studied hard, and built his business from scratch. He spoke about his struggles, the failures people never saw, and how loneliness often came with success. Samuel listened closely, nodding with genuine interest. "It sounds like even success can be heavy," he said softly. Mr. Li looked at him with admiration. "Yes, most people chase wealth, but they forget peace. You have peace in your eyes." Samuel smiled, unsure how to respond. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea. Then Mr. Li placed his cup down and said thoughtfully, "You know, Samuel, the world often sees people by what they wear or where they stand. But real value, is invisible. Samuel nodded slowly. I think that's true. People judge too quickly. I felt that many times. Mr. Lee's expression softened. Yesterday, when no one could understand me, I realized how lonely it feels to not be heard. You changed that. You reminded me that respect has no language. Samuel's heart filled with quiet pride. Thank you, sir. I'm glad I could help. Mr. Lee smiled. You didn't just help me. You taught everyone in that lobby a lesson. He stood up and extended his hand. Come to dinner with me tonight, Samuel. I want to introduce you to some people. You belong in bigger rooms than this. Samuel's eyes widened. Dinner? With you, sir? Mr. Lee nodded. Yes. And from now on, you don't need to call me sir. I call me Lee. Samuel hesitated, then smiled. All right, Lee. As Mr. Lee walked away, Samuel sat there, the warm breeze brushing against his face. He felt a strange mix of disbelief and gratitude. The man he had once watched from afar was now treating him like an equal, like a friend. And deep inside, Samuel knew that something extraordinary had begun. A bridge had been built, not between two languages, but between two hearts. That evening, the Crystal Grand Hotel glowed like a palace. The lights reflected off the glass walls, and the quiet hum of luxury filled the air. In the private dining hall on the top floor, Mr. Lee Wei waited at a beautifully set table overlooking the city skyline. Plates of steamed dumplings, roasted duck, and jasmine tea covered the table, filling the air with a warm aroma. For a moment, Mr. Lee stood by the window watching the endless sea of lights below. New York was loud, alive, and full of people, but it was also lonely. Money, he knew, could buy everything except peace. Then the door opened quietly. Samuel stepped in, wearing a simple but elegant suit borrowed from one of the staff. He looked nervous but composed. When Mr. Lee saw him, he smiled warmly. Samuel, he greeted in Mandarin, Ni Lila. You came. Samuel bowed his head respectfully. Yes, sir. I mean, Lee. Mr. Lee laughed softly. Good. You remembered. He gestured toward the table. Please, sit. Tonight we eat as friends. Samuel hesitated for a second, then smiled and took a seat across from him. The golden lights above shimmered softly, making the scene feel almost unreal. A Chinese millionaire and a hotel servant sharing dinner like equals. Mr. Lee poured him tea. I hope you like Chinese food, he said. Samuel chuckled. I used to eat it a lot back when I was studying. Dumplings were my favorite. Mr. Lee's eyes sparkled. Then you must try these. My chef brought them all the way from Shanghai. They both laughed lightly, the sound natural and easy. After a few minutes of small talk, Mr. Lee's tone grew gentler. You know, Samuel, yesterday when you spoke Mandarin to me, it reminded me of something I lost. Samuel looked curious. What do you mean? Mr. Lee leaned back, his gaze distant. When I became successful, people started treating me differently. Everywhere I go, people bow, flatter, and agree. Not because they respect me, but because they fear me. Yesterday, when you spoke, I saw something honest. You weren't trying to impress me. You just wanted to help. Samuel smiled quietly. Where I come from, helping others is normal. My father always said, kindness costs nothing, but it gives everything. Mr. Lee nodded slowly. Your father was a wise man. Samuel's eyes softened. He was. He passed away a few years ago, but I still hear his words. He taught me to treat every person, rich or poor, with the same respect. The room fell silent for a moment. Only the faint sound of soft music played in the background. Mr. Lee said thoughtfully, It's strange, isn't it? We live in a world where everyone wants to be seen, yet the people who truly deserve to be noticed are often invisible. Samuel looked down at his cup. Yes, he said quietly. Sometimes I feel that way. People see the uniform, not the person, but that's okay. I've learned to find pride in my work. Mr. Lee watched him carefully. You shouldn't just find pride, Samuel. You should be recognized for what you are, intelligent, patient, and humble. Those qualities are rare. Samuel gave a modest smile. Maybe the world doesn't see them as rare. Maybe they just see me as another worker. Mr. Lee leaned forward slightly. Then the world is blind? Samuel looked up, surprised. Mr. Lee's tone was calm but strong. In my country we say a tree's roots are its honor. You, Samuel, are rooted in goodness. That's more valuable than gold. For a few seconds Samuel didn't speak. No one had ever said something like that to him before. He blinked back the sting of tears. Thank you, Lee. That means more to me than you know. Mr. Lee smiled. Do you know why I asked to meet you again? Samuel shook his head. Because yesterday, I saw more than a kind man. I saw potential. Mr. Lee said, you understand culture, you speak Mandarin, and you have empathy, something the world's richest businessmen often forget. I need people like you around me. Samuel's eyes widened slightly. You mean? Mr. Lee nodded slowly. I want you to consider working with me, not as a cleaner but as a cultural and communication consultant for my company. Samuel's mouth fell open slightly. Me? Work for you? Yes, Mr. Lee said simply. You belong in a place where your mind, not your uniform, defines you. For a moment Samuel couldn't find his words. His throat tightened and all he could manage was a whisper. Lie. I don't know what to say. Mr. Lee smiled. Say you'll think about it. No pressure. But I believe fate doesn't make mistakes. We met for a reason. Samuel nodded slowly, his heart pounding with emotion. I'll think about it, I promise. Mr. Lee raised his teacup. To new beginnings. Samuel smiled and lifted his own cup. To respect, he said softly. They clinked cups gently. The conversation continued for hours. Stories, laughter, quiet reflections. By the end of the night, it no longer felt like a meeting between a millionaire and a servant, but between two souls who had recognized each other's humanity. Tratitio. Samuel left the dining hall that night. The city lights glimmered outside like stars reflected on glass. He stepped into the cool night air, his heart light yet full. For years he had walked invisible among people who never looked beyond his uniform. But now, for the first time, someone had truly seen him, not as a cleaner, not as an employee, but as a man of worth. As he walked back to his small room, Samuel whispered to himself, maybe my father was right. Kindness does find its way back. Far above, in his suite, Mr. Lee stood by the window, watching the same city lights. A soft smile played on his lips. Some people chase fortune, he murmured in Mandarin, but the greatest treasure is a good heart. And that night, in two very different rooms, two very different men shared the same peace, the kind that money cannot buy. The next day dawned quietly. A soft golden light touched the windows of the Crystal Grand Hotel, and the city outside hummed with its usual rhythm. But inside something felt different, as if kindness had left a small invisible mark in the air. Samuel woke up before sunrise, his mind still full of last night's dinner with Mr. Lee. He had barely slept. Every moment replayed in his head, the laughter, the stories, and the incredible offer Mr. Lee had made. A part of him still wondered if it had all been a dream. He walked into the hotel through the back entrance as he always did, wearing his neatly pressed blue uniform. The staff greeted him more warmly now. Polite smiles, friendly nods, even a few claps on the shoulder. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. By noon, whispers spread again through the hotel. The Chinese millionaire is hosting a conference tonight, one bellboy said. He's giving a speech in the grand ballroom. Samuel smiled faintly. He had no reason to be there. He was just part of the maintenance staff, but he felt happy for Mr. Lee. That evening, the grand ballroom transformed into a sea of elegance. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Hundreds of guests, investors, businessmen, journalists, gathered to hear Mr. Lee speak. Everyone was dressed in expensive suits and gowns, chatting over glasses of champagne. In a quiet corner of the room, Samuel worked silently, polishing the silver trays and setting tables. He didn't mind. Watching from the sidelines was enough. Soon the lights dimmed slightly as Mr. Lee walked onto the stage. The crowd greeted him with polite applause. He stood tall and calm, wearing a dark suit that reflected his quiet confidence. Behind him, a screen displayed the words, "Bridging Worlds, Business and Humanity." Mr. Lee adjusted the microphone and began speaking in English, his accent gentle but clear. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to stand before so many brilliant minds tonight." The crowd clapped softly. He continued, "People often ask me about success, how I built my empire, how I became wealthy. But tonight I want to talk about something different, something much more valuable than money." The room grew quiet. Mr. Lee smiled faintly. "Yesterday, when I arrived at this hotel, something unexpected happened. I spoke in my native tongue, Mandarin, but no one understood me. Not the staff, not the managers. I felt frustrated, even lonely in a place full of people." Whispers rippled across the room. Some of the staff exchanged glances. They remembered that awkward scene vividly. Mr. Lee continued, "But then someone stepped forward. Not a manager, not an executive, a man in a cleaner's uniform. His name is Samuel." The crowd turned to look around. The spotlight shifted slightly toward the back of the room, where Samuel froze holding a tray in his hands. "He spoke to me in perfect Mandarin," Mr. Lee said proudly.
"He understood me when no one else could."
In that moment, he didn't just translate my words, he gave me respect. A wave of surprise and admiration filled the room. Some gasped softly. The managers at the front looked embarrassed, realizing how little they had noticed Samuel before. Mr. Lee's voice grew more emotional. "We often judge people by what they wear, what they own, or what they can give us. But true greatness doesn't come from wealth. It comes from the heart." He paused, then smiled warmly. "Samuel, my friend, please come here." Samuel's heart pounded. He stood frozen, unsure what to do. A few of the waiters nudged him gently. "Go on," one whispered. "He's calling you." Slowly, Samuel put down the tray and walked toward the stage. The room was completely silent except for the soft echo of his footsteps. His palms were sweaty, and his heart felt like it was trying to escape his chest. When he reached the stage, Mr. Lee stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "This man," Mr. Lee said, his voice firm, "reminded me that humanity is not defined by job titles or bank accounts. Yesterday he was cleaning floors. Today he cleans hearts, mine included." The crowd erupted into applause. Some stood up clapping loudly while others wiped their eyes. It wasn't just a speech anymore, it was a moment of truth. Samuel's eyes glistened. He tried to speak but couldn't find the words. Mr. Lee smiled gently and continued, "And because of that, I want to make an announcement. From today, Samuel will no longer work as a cleaner. He will be joining my company as a language and cultural advisor." The applause grew thunderous. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and the staff stared in disbelief. Mr. Robinson, the manager, looked both proud and humbled at the same time. Samuel stood there, trembling, overwhelmed. "Lee, I don't know what to say," he whispered softly. Mr. Lee leaned closer and said quietly, "Just promise me one thing, that you'll never doubt your worth again." Samuel nodded, tears finally slipping down his cheeks. "I promise." Mr. Lee turned to the crowd once more. "Let this be a reminder to all of us," he said firmly. "The language of respect is universal, and sometimes the greatest lessons come from those we overlook." The applause lasted long after he finished speaking. When Samuel finally stepped off the stage, dozens of guests came to shake his hand. Some took photos, others thanked him for inspiring them. For the first time in his life, Samuel didn't feel like someone blending into the background. He felt seen, valued, and respected. Later that night, when the ballroom emptied and the lights dimmed, Samuel stood alone for a moment, looking at the city through the glass windows. The skyline sparkled like 1,000 stars, and for once he felt like one of them, shining, not because he was rich, but because he had been recognized. He smiled softly and whispered to himself, "Respect, and that's the real language of the world." And somewhere behind him, Mr. Lee watched quietly, smiling too. He knew this was not the end of Samuel's story. It was only the beginning. The night after the conference, the Crystal Grand Hotel glimmered under the moonlight. The grand chandeliers had dimmed, the music had faded, and the guests had all gone home. But the story of what happened inside that ballroom was already spreading like wildfire. Samuel sat quietly on the edge of his bed in the staff dormitory, still wearing the same suit he had worn that evening. His heart was full. The cheers, the applause, the flashes of cameras, it all felt like something out of a dream. He touched the small gold pin that Mr. Lee had given him before they parted. It bore the logo of Lee Enterprises and below it his new title, Language and Cultural Advisor. He smiled to himself. Just 2 days ago, that same hand had held a mop. Now it held opportunity. The next morning, when he entered the hotel, the atmosphere was entirely different. Staff who once passed him without a word now smiled warmly. Some clapped as he walked through the hallway. The receptionist, Emily, waved from behind the counter. "Morning, Mr. Samuel," she said playfully. He laughed softly. "Just Samuel, please." Even the strict manager, Mr. Robinson, came out of his office to shake his hand. "I owe you an apology," he said, his tone sincere. "You reminded all of us that greatness doesn't wear a name tag. It lives in the heart." "I'm proud to have worked beside you," Samuel smiled humbly. "Thank you, sir. You've always been kind to me, even when you didn't see me." The manager nodded slowly. "And now I do." By noon, news crews had gathered in front of the hotel. Word had spread online. Black servant stuns millionaire by speaking fluent Chinese. Gets life-changing offer. Videos from the conference had gone viral overnight. Millions of people around the world watched as Samuel, the quiet janitor, spoke Mandarin beside a Chinese tycoon. Comments flooded the internet. This is what humanity looks like. Respect knows no language. A real-life miracle. Mr. Lee's company had already issued a public statement, praising Samuel's humility and skill. Reporters wanted interviews, and strangers sent messages of admiration from across the globe. That evening, Mr. Lee returned to the hotel for one last time before flying back to China. When Samuel saw him enter the lobby, he hurried forward to greet him. "Lee," he said with a wide smile. "You didn't have to come back. I thought you'd be on your flight already." Mr. Lee smiled warmly. "I couldn't leave without saying goodbye to my friend." They walked together through the quiet lounge, where the golden sunset poured through the tall windows, painting the room in a soft glow. Mr. Lee motioned for Samuel to sit beside him. "I've seen a lot of things in life," Mr. Lee began slowly. "But your honesty, your humility, they moved me more than any business deal I've ever made." Samuel looked down, modest as always. "I only did what anyone would have done." Mr. Lee chuckled. "No, Samuel. Not anyone. That's what makes it rare. When everyone else stayed silent, you stepped forward. That is leadership." He reached into his briefcase and handed Samuel a folder. Inside was a formal offer letter, signed, sealed, and stamped. "You'll fly to Shanghai next month," Mr. Lee explained. "You'll help my company expand across Africa and the West. You'll teach language, cultural understanding, and empathy to my team. You'll be our bridge." Samuel stared at the letter, stunned. "Lee, this is too much. I don't know how to thank you." Mr. Lee smiled softly. "You already did, Samuel. That day you spoke to me, you reminded me that humanity still exists in this world. This is not a gift, it's destiny." Tears welled in Samuel's eyes. "You changed my life." Mr. Lee shook his head. "No, my friend. You changed your life the moment you chose kindness." There was a long pause, a peaceful silence filled with gratitude and mutual respect.